There we go. All right, welcome to lesson 6 of DM120 HTML and CSS. So agenda for today is we will continue to learn about layouts. We are specifically going to be learning about Flexbox. All right. Before we start, like always, let's do a quick revision of what we went through the last class. Then we're going to look at what is Flexbox, why should we use Flexbox. Then we'll look at the different Flexbox properties, which is divided into two parts, container properties and item or element properties. So we're gonna look at those categories individually. We're gonna watch a video. I can teach it, but it comes, why not learn it from someone who knows it much better and is more organized than I am in this case. All right, and then we're gonna look at project number 4. All right, revision. So what did we learn in the last class? We learned about resource collecting and wireframing, aka the planning of the website and what to do before you create the website, right? Then we looked at domain names, the types of domain names, and the cost of domain names, right? Also, we looked at where we can purchase domain names or where we can register domain names. I also showed you a couple of free ones, so you can just have them registered at your pleasure. All right. The next thing that we learned in the last class was where can websites be hosted. We looked at Bluehost, HostGator, GoDaddy, stuff like that. And hosting is also called the server. And then we learned how to upload websites via the use of FTP, file transfer protocol. And we learned how we can make our websites go live, how to publish our websites, right? Then we also looked at MindTap assignment T1.1, which was Jed's tree care. I think everybody's pretty much finished with it other than a couple of people. And then we looked at T2.1, the Phillips Henslow Theater yesterday. All right, so does anybody have any questions regarding any of these things? Yes, no?
No questions.
No questions.
I'm fine.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, so what is Flexbox? Now, before we even understand what is Flexbox, we need to do a revision of what the general structure of a website is. And I've been talking about this for a little bit now. A website is simply a container that has, other containers, and inside those containers are elements which go inside other containers. So it's like it's just a container inside a container inside a container, right? Flexbox is one of those ways to contain the elements of inside a website, right? So it is Flexbox is a box model for CSS3, all right? And Flexbox, it's pretty simple, stands for flexible box model. All right. So why should we? What does Flexbox do? It allows for an easy, clean, and practical way to lay out and arrange different containers inside of your site. All right. It allows you to do the same for the items, elements inside of the containers. Containers are like div, article, section, aside, all of those, container level elements. And we can, move things around using Flexbox. Not only that, we can also move anything that is inside of the div or the container level element using Flexbox. All right. So why use Flexbox? The most general and easiest way to, sorry, the most general, no, not most general. What should I put it as? Let's just say Flexbox is the modern way to arrange and organize contents in your site. It's website development has happened since it first got launched, right? Since the internet was around. We every day there is some sort of development, and Flexbox is pretty much the newest thing. So it is important that you learn the newest thing. You can't be working with old technology. While there are some instances where you might have to learn the use of old technology, um, in the modern day, Flexbox is pretty much the standard way of organizing the contents inside of your website. Why use it? It reduces the need for widths, margins, padding, borders, stuff like that. Not border, but margins, padding, stuff like that, which means there is less math involved. So you don't have to do like calculations and stuff like that. If you use Flexbox, it just helps things get organized easier without the use of too much math in it. All right. It is new technology, which means that you do not need to use float and clear. We saw how complicated floats and clears can be. So if you learn how to use Flexbox, it is, you just don't have to worry about using float and clear anymore. All right. And it is flexible in nature, as the name states, right? It is flexible, which means the containers will not crash or collapse. So, if you use the old school way, what happens is if your calculations are incorrect or things get moved around, the items inside of the container might not fit in the container that you built. So it's like a pretty solid thing, right? So when you use Flexbox, oh sorry, let me get back to that point. So if the container, sorry, if the items don't fit inside of the container, what's going to happen is like your website might look all wonky because things are not fitting properly inside of the containers, which is called crashing or collapsing of the containers. So that's what it is. Flexbox being flexible, it can pretty much change its shape based on the size of the content inside of the container element, right? And because of its flexible nature, it allows for the creation of responsive and mobile friendly sites. I'm sure everybody has heard about this term, responsive website, mobile friendly website. When we were doing things the old school way, what would happen is you would have to sort of create a completely new website just so that it's like mobile friendly, or you would have to use media queries and stuff like that, which we will get to later. But with the use of Flexbox, it just adjusts to the dimension of the screen, right? So that is the beauty of Flexbox, which in terms makes it more responsive, and you can view it easily on like cell phones, iPads, I don't know what have you, all of the other electronic devices besides your computer. And one of the main things about using Flexbox is that you can change the items of the container. I should have written items, without having to edit the HTML. So meaning that, HTML follows like a top to bottom structure, right? So if you need to move something in the middle, you're not going to be able to do it in CSS just like that. You would have to like go and edit the HTML, put it down to where you want it, and then that's how it would work. Whereas with Flexbox, you just have the ability to change positions. So that is what Flexbox does, and we should be definitely using Flexbox. Let's say in the future you guys become these or let's say in the future you are going to go apply for a job as a web developer. They're definitely going to ask you, have you used Flexbox? And in fact, that's not just a normal question. That is something that is mandatory. You need to learn how to use Flexbox. It's just a standardized process nowadays. All right. So Flexbox properties. By properties, I just mean like the statements and the syntaxes, um, and they can be divided into two categories. One is for the container and one is for the item elements, right? The ones you see here are for the container, for like your divs, articles, asides, section, stuff like that. And we will get into knowing each and every one of them in a little bit. But I just wanted to show you all of the options we have. It's not like an endless list. It's just a couple of them. So you just need to learn a couple of them. You don't need to know them by heart. This is this is just something as the more you do, the more you learn, right? So you can't. This is not history, geography. This is not. You don't have to remember the dates. It just starts to happen automatically the more you practice. All right, so these are the properties that can be applied to the container, all right, like your divs. And then these are the properties that can be applied inside of the container. Your paragraphs, your header ones, what else? Like images, stuff like that, right? And this is an even shorter list, so nothing to worry about here. Okay, so let us get into container properties. All right, so let's take a look at how we can apply Flexbox properties to the container elements. All right, give me a second.
We're going to look through some examples.
All right, can everybody hear the volume?
Yes.
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 Okay, perfect. All right, I'm going to mute myself and we will just watch this video. 17 minutes. So my suggestion for you is that you have a notepad so that you can take notes. I found it useful in the past for this tutorial at least, just so you understand how all of these properties are being applied into the Flexbox. All right, so take notes. Okay, I'm gonna mute myself.
We're going to look through some examples, or we're going to open up a CodePen thing and just play around with it pretty much, looking at what all the different things do, and I'll try and explain as much as possible as I go. So let's just jump right into it.
All right, so what I've done now is I've set up a document here in CodePen. So the link for this will be down below. All we have is a container here with 5 different items inside. So it's
For us, it's really blurry for some reason. Yeah. I cannot see anything. Yeah, better.
just 5 different divs. I've given them a class of item, but there's nothing much going on these yet. My container itself just has a pink background so we can see where my container is. I've given it a height of 50 VH and a width of 50 VH just to make sure.
So just so you know what is happening, this pink box is a div. All of these little blue boxes are also divs. So you can see in the code over here, right? So inside of a div, there is another div. There are 5 divs in there, right? So inside of a container, there are 5 other containers. And he's just going to be showing us how to modify these containers using Flexbox.
Sure that it's a perfect square I actually meant to make that VW, so why don't we change that over now? The padding on it will be just 0.5, so I just want to keep my items off the side, and I've centered it on the screen. Here on my items themselves, so each one of these little items just has a light blue background on it and a margin of 0.05, and the whole, or 0.5 I should say, and the whole point of that is just to create these little spaces in between them so we can separate them a little bit. The first thing I'm going to do right now is just change this over, so I'm going to change the display to flex. And as soon as I change the display to flex, we can see that everything completely changes. I'm going to run through, we're going to be going through this sort of item by item of all the different flex properties. So the very first flex property we're going to look at right now is the flex direction. And what this is done by default is set it to row. So a row is something that goes all the way across, right? So we have my one big row, and then, so because it's set as a row, these have turned sort of into columns inside of that row. So again, if I take this, we take both of these off, we can see it completely changes the behavior of what's going on. So by being a row, all of my items have to be in that one row, so they all line up one next to each other. They also stretch to take this whole area up. You don't always see this if they don't have a background on them, so I like playing around with background colors a little bit just so I really know what's going on. So I said we're going to look at this item by item. So the first thing we have here is our flex direction. So my flex direction by default is row, and we can actually reverse this. So I can do a row reverse, and it's going to switch it all around. This is almost like doing, or it's almost exactly like doing a float right. So you can see that it actually does the flex item 1. My first one goes all the way to the right side, and then it goes in reverse order, and they're lined up all the way on the side there. So doing a row reverse is literally pretty much like doing a float right. The other option we have is to do a column. And if I set to column, it's almost resetting it back to how it was before, where they're all stacking one on top of each other. So now that it's a column, a column will make things stack instead of go next to one another. So it depends on the way you want it to behave. Personally, I like being able to make this change at different media queries. This works really well for a navigation. Because in a navigation you might have something that's row to begin with. You have your navigation items one next to each other, and then at a different screen size they'll switch over to a column and they'll all line up one on top of each other, which sort of makes more sense at the smaller screen sizes. So for now I'm going to switch this back over to row, and we'll look at the next thing we can do. And the next thing we can do is a flex wrap. So flex wrap by default is set to no wrap, meaning things don't wrap. And right now it doesn't really make much sense because I only have 5 items and they're not taking up all the space. So I'm actually going to take these 5 items and let's paste this in there. So I have 10. And you'll see now they're all sort of squeezing into the available space. They're making room for one another, and they've gotten a lot smaller. And let's add a whole bunch more actually. And you can see now they're actually spilling out the side. So because they've gotten as small as they can possibly get. So one thing with flex items is they will adjust automatically to how big or how small they should be based on the content that's inside of them. And because now I have so many items, they've gotten as small as they can get, and they're flying out the side. So let's add a whole bunch more. Let's get rid of that space. And they're just spilling out the side here. By default, things will spill out the side, and it's personally kind of annoying that that's the default, is no wrap. But we can easily switch this over to a wrap, and now they'll stack one on top of each other instead. You'll also notice that, let's just undo that for a second. With the no wrap, they got as small as they could, so it was literally shrinking down to the smallest possible size it could to fit that text. And then when I switch it over to wrap, it's keeping the text on one line of code, or one line of visual line here. So with flex item 1, that's as small as it's going to get. It runs out of room and it will wrap that down below. I'm going to delete a whole bunch of these. Let's go back to the original that we had. So another way this does impact how things are working is I'm going to go over to my items here and give these a width. So if I do a width of like 25% on it, my wrap, it is making it wrap down. So it's 25, 50, 75%. I have some padding on these, and I have some, or I don't have padding, but I have some margin on these, so it doesn't have enough room to fit there, so it's wrapping down below. This is something that's really strange though. If this is set to no wrap, it actually changes the width of it. It's not 25%, it's squeezing it in to fit, which personally I find a little weird. And what that means is it will, you can see that it's shrinking and growing. So it's ignoring this width more or less. It's sort of like a max width almost. And just to show you, if I make this like 1,000 pixels, oops, I don't need 2 semicolons there, but 1,000 pixels, it doesn't change. It's not all of a sudden shooting out the side because it's 1,000 pixels tall. And this is a bit of an unexpected behavior, so just something to watch out. If something's not behaving the way you'd expect it to, just be aware. The default is no wrap. We can switch that over to wrap. Again, becomes almost like a max width on it, so it's not going to spill out the side. So if I switch this back over to 25%, let's say, this is 25% now. And if my screen got really small, I guess, then you can see it's not even a, well, yeah, it still is a max width, but it's
just in case anybody doesn't know what responsive design is, that is what responsive design. You can see that, you know, he's stretching and expanding his screen, and the contents are just, you know, moving alongside what his screen size is. So that is what responsive is. It is responsive to the size of the screen that it is using. Also, it is responsive to the size of the container that it is contained inside of. All right, so that's just what responsive design is, and that is how you make like mobile friendly websites. All right, moving on.
It's changing based on the size of the overall container and all of that stuff. So it's a little bit unexpected, the way this flex wrap works. And again, the default is no wrap. The next thing we can look at is something called flex flow. And flex flow is just a shorthand for flex direction and flex wrap. So I have flex direction row, flex wrap is no wrap. I could write flex row, and in here I could write row no wrap. So this is literally the same thing as keeping this. Like my flex direction is row, my wrap is no wrap. So if I switch this over to column, it should overwrite actually. Oops, I didn't, this is flex flow, not flex row, flow. There we go. So my column is overwriting my row that's here. So flex flow is combining the flex direction and the flex wrap together into one as a shorthand. I'm gonna get rid of that one for now. The next really big ones that we can look at are justify content, align items, and align content. And these are often mixed up. And for good reason, I would say. So I'm going to put these on their own line. I'm going to do a justify content first. I misspelled that though. Justify content. And the default for this is flex start. So I'm going to leave that now. So nothing should change. That is the default value for our justify content. We could switch flex start to flex end, and that's going to push everything over to the end of our item. Now, the way justify content works is it's dealing with the main axis. So I'm dealing with a row, so rows go from here over to this side. So it's moving the content on the main axis, so it's moving it this way. So if I flex start is starting at the start of my row, flex end is pushing everything over to the end. I can also center that, so let's do a center. So that's kind of cool, it's centering it. This is a really nice thing that we couldn't do with our old float and clear system. So flex, our justify content lets us center things. We also have a space between, which will keep the first item all the way on the left, our last item all the way on the right, and it just puts an equal amount of space between all of them. And the last one, which I really like, is space around, which will put an equal amount of space on each item. So this space is equal to halfway in between these two, which is equal to this, which is equal to this, and so on and so forth. So it's an equal amount of space around each item. It's sort of like equal margins on the left and the right of each item in this case. But remember, the justify content is working on the actual axis, the main axis. So I said before that a row goes this way. A column goes up and down. So if I switch my flex direction to column, the justify content is now working up and down. So my space around, it's putting the same space on top and on the bottom. And if I put a center on this, it will center it vertically instead of horizontally. And if I make this a flex end, it's going to push it all the way to the bottom. So it's a little bit weird that justify content works differently, but it's always focused on the main axis, and that's the thing to remember. I'm going to switch this back to row for a second now. And let's put this back to flex start just for the moment. Another one that we have is our align items. So let's try our align items. We're almost at the end of these actually. Align item.
So before we move forward, if anybody is confused, I just wanted to let you know. So when he does row, the start becomes over here, okay, to the left side of the box. All right. When he does column, then the start becomes at this part over here. All right. So which means if he does flex end, the so when he does justify content flex end, it will start from over here because that's the end part. Whereas when it is in row, it starts from over here. So it's just working on based on where the start is and where the end is, just depending on the column and the row structure of things. All right.
And the default for this is stretch. So nothing should change because that's the default for my align items. I'm going to change this over to a flex start. So it's the same wording that I'm putting there, but I'm looking at the alignment of my items. I want my items to start at the top, so they're shrinking down to the minimum size. They're not stretching to fill up that whole space anymore. They're going all the way up to here. So that's flex start. You can guess probably what flex end is going to do. It's going to pull it all the way down to the bottom. Now the difference is justify content is working on the main axis. So justify content is always the main axis, and align items is working on the cross axis, which means the opposite axis. So because this is a row, my justify content is working this way, and my align items is working up and down. So flex end is there. Now if I switch this over to a column, they switch over. So flex start means the top, and align items flex end means the right side, because again it's the cross axis. And this is where it can get kind of confusing. When do I use justify content and when do I use align items? They all take pretty much the same properties. There is one that's a little bit different, but again, let's just do a little, let's center that. So then it gets centered in the middle. And one thing that's kind of convenient is a center will always just plug something right in the middle. If you're not sure which one to use, honestly, as you're getting used to this, just try one, and if it was the wrong one, use the other one. I know it's not the perfect answer, but it should work pretty well overall. One thing that align items has, or one thing it doesn't have, is the space between and space around, and one thing it does have is baseline. And let's change this back to a row for now. Okay, so now that they're back to just being there, I'm going to take, let's call this big. And let's come over here and say that big has a font size of 2M. So it should be twice as big, that font. So my align items, let's just do a flex start. And they're all going to be lined up right on the top. And this is because of a little bit of extra margin we have there, so it's pushing it down a bit. So they're all effectively they're all lined up on the top. And when we use the align items baseline, it means that the first line of text is all lining up on the same line there. So you can see that on the bottom of the first line of text on all of them. So if one of these, the only time you'll really notice a difference with this align items baseline is if there is different font size involved. If everything is the same font size, this will look exactly the same as a font, as the flex start. But because our font sizes are different, the flex start does look a little bit different. You can imagine the baseline one works really well if you had a main content area and then a sidebar, because you wouldn't want this happening. This is one of those really annoying things that can happen where something's starting up higher than other things. So if your main content area and your baseline, oops, I misspelled that. If your main content area and your sidebar both have a line item or are sitting in something with an align items baseline, you know that everything's always going to be starting at the same point, which just looks a little cleaner. So that is pretty cool. Now another thing that can be confusing is something called align content. And that's because align content has it has the same properties as the justify content. They both have content in them, so I guess that makes sense. So we don't have the baseline option, and we do have the space between and the space around. Now align content only works if you have multiple lines of content. Right now it's not going to do anything, and it also conflicts with the align items. So I'm actually going to delete align items now so we can see what it's doing. And when you only have one set of things here, let's just do an align items flex end. And you can see it's not actually doing anything. Whereas if I had my align items flex end, they would be just all lined up at the bottom. Align context flex end hasn't changed anything. It looks exactly like it did. It's always looked. So again, it only works when you have multiple things along the cross axis. So my cross axis in this case is up and down. So let's put a whole bunch of stuff in there. And let's change this over to wrap so we actually get multiple lines of stuff. There we go. So now my aligned content is going to start working. So I can do a center on that. Now just to show you, this is my aligned content. I'm going to comment that out. Let's put in an align items center. And you can see that works a little bit differently. So align items center is centering each one in that available space that it has. So let's put that back to stretch for a second. So it's pretty much aligning it in the center of each one of these parts here. Whereas the align content center will again overwrite what this is going on. So if I delete that, it won't even change anything. And it's aligning all of the content right in the middle. We can also do a space around, or we can do a space between. So the align content actually works a lot like the justify content, but you need to have multiple lines of content. Once again, I can't emphasize that enough. Whereas align items is dealing it more one at a time. It's really one of those things. Right now, it might be seeming kind of confusing. How do you know which one to choose? You try one or another. The other thing I would suggest is having a Flexbox playground type of thing to play around with, and I will put a link to one of those below. It is a lifesaver when you're first playing around with this stuff, having one of them around. I still use one sometimes just because the mix of all these properties can get kind of confusing.
And that's what you can do with your Flex containers. So I hope you liked that video. Just so you know, you might have seen it.
All right, so that was the use of the container properties. All right, now I understand this can be a little confusing. The main objective is not for you to actually just be able to do immediately, but it's just to see like how things work with Flexbox. All right, I don't expect you to just watch this video and be able to do it. It takes time and it takes practice, and you have to do it in order to understand it. The main thing is, did you notice that things are much more simpler to move around with the use of Flexbox? Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think it's more specific with the studio, Visual Studio. I think we have less options. With this one, we can do more.
With what? With Visual Studio? No, this is just code. You can just pretty much do it with anything.
No, but with Flexbox, I feel we can do more. Like
Oh,
we can
okay.
move around more
Yeah.
to Visual Studio.
Yeah, so I don't know what for the coronavirus, I don't know what you guys did for aligning items. I don't know if anybody even, went with the float and clear. If you did, you're a brave person, because even I don't like doing that. But with Flexbox, things just become much simpler, and it's just much easier to move. Again, the idea is not that you look at this and then you just be able to do. The idea behind watching this video is that you can see what are the things Flexbox can do compared to the old school method, which was float and clear and margin and moving this and that. Flexbox just erases all of those things. All right. Okay, so that was container properties. Let's look at the next one, which is item or element properties. Again, these are the items that are inside of the container. So what is inside of the div? Your paragraphs, your headings, stuff like that. So what can you do with the use of Flexbox? All right, so let's just have a look. I think this one's a little bit shorter.
Flex items are the little everything that's inside a Flexbox. As soon as we take a container and we say display flex, everything inside becomes a flex item, and we can do a whole bunch of cool flex stuff with it where we're controlling them individually. So We saw before, you can make everything shift from one side to the other, but what if you want one thing to act differently? That's what you can do with a bunch of the Flexbox properties that are dealing with individual items, and that's what we're going to be exploring right now.
All right, so for flex items, the behavior changes things a little bit. So we're just going to stick with 3 items in this one instead of the 5 that we had in the last. And the very first thing, just to look at really quickly, there's actually there's 5 different properties we're going to be looking at. There's flex grow, there's a flex shrink. I always misspell shrink. Hopefully I don't do that in this video. There's the flex basis, there's the order, and there's the align self, which is really, really awesome. Now flex, oh, and there's one more, sorry. There's also just flex. And flex is a shorthand for these 3, and it's actually sort of recommended, but we're going to look at these 3 first, and then we'll get into what these other ones here are after. Now the thing that's important to know with it is as soon as one of your items gets it, so here even we can take my flex grow off of item, you can see up here we have our 1, 2, and 3 that I've added, so each one I can control separately. So if I do a flex grow on this, I'm just going to put a 1 on there. I mean, see, it's growing to take up all the available space. So the default for flex grow is 0, which is why by default they look like this. But as soon as I put a 1 in there, and they're unit list numbers. So as soon as I put a 1 in there, it now takes up all the available space. The way the flex grow works deals a little bit with how some of the other things work. So I'm just going to set up on here too. So we also have a flex shrink, and the default flex shrink is 1. I'll put this to 0. And we have my flex basis. And the flex basis is how much room does this want to be taking up? If it has the available space, how much should it take up? So let's say we want it to be 250 pixels wide. So now it's sitting at 250 pixels. And I'm going to copy this on to all 3 because I think this is the easiest way to understand it. So we have a 2 and we have a 3. Except I should have made this a lot smaller. But just really quick, this is how much space it wants to take up. As you can see right now, it's smaller than 250 pixels. There's not enough room inside the container. Actually, maybe I should make my container a little bit wider. Let's make it like 80. Yeah, that will work well. So it has the amount of space. So what it's doing is it's not growing. So the grow is 0. That's the default. Its shrink is 1, which we'll get into in a second. And it's sitting at its ideal width of 250 pixels. And as I grow it, it's going to stay there. But if it gets to smaller, you can see that now when it's not going to overflow at the side, it's going to get smaller than 250 pixels. So this is a lot like the width when I was looking at it before. It's more like a max width. It's the ideal width. But if it has to get smaller, it will get smaller than that. So that is important to understand. It does make responsive layouts a little bit easier to deal with because you're not getting locked into a width. Now I'm going to switch number 1 here to a flex grow of 1. And it grows to take up all that available space. It's taking all the space that's available. These ones aren't growing. So by this being a flex grow 1, it's saying, I want to be 250 pixels, but if there is available space, grow to fill that space. Now this is at 1, but it's the only one. So if you're the only one, it's growing and the other 2 are going to stay the same. And then here everything shrinks together. Now if I make this a flex grow of 1, now they're going to grow at the same pace. These both grow at equally. So when I'm getting smaller or bigger, the amount of space that they're growing by is the same. And let's go on to number 3 here, and I'll make that a flex grow of 2. So when we're at our ideal width of 250 pixels, they should all look the same. They'll all shrink the same way. But if they have more space than they need, this one will grow faster than these 2. So let's even make this a 3 just to sort of exaggerate it a little bit. You can see that this space is now bigger than these 2. So these 2 are growing at the same rate, and this one is growing faster than the other ones because it has the larger flex grow. So you can sort of guess now what's going to happen with the flex shrink. My flex shrink, let's put this one all the way up to a 3. So now when I'm smaller than 250 pixels, how fast is it shrinking? So now you can see that this one is actually shrinking faster than the other ones. So with these ones, it's growing faster when it's bigger than 250 pixels, and it's shrinking faster when it's less than 250 pixels. So that's pretty cool. So that's with the shrink. So let's put this back to a 1. So they should all be equal. And just to show you, I can make this one a 2. So now the one in the middle is going to shrink faster than the other ones. But when I get to a larger screen size, this one here is still growing faster than them because the grow 1, a grow 1, and a grow 3. And again, if I have 2 items with the same number, those 2 will grow at an equal speed, and this one will grow slower than the other ones. And if this is a flex grow of 0, it's going to stay at its flex basis size. So it's just always, as long as I'm bigger than 250 pixels, it's just going to stay at 250. So that's how the flex grow, the flex shrink, and the flex basis works, and the shorthand for it is just flex. So this would just be 0, 1, 250 pixels, and then I can get rid of all of that, and that's the exact same thing. So this one would be a flex of 3, 2, 250 pixels, and this last one would be a flex of 3, 1, 250 pixels. So one thing that's nice about just writing flex is if I just do a flex 250, it's going to default the rest to, it's going to assume what you want for the other ones. Now, what that is doing is it actually is letting this one grow. So let's do my flex grow of 1 and a flex grow of 1. So the growing should be all the same now. So it's assuming if you do a flex 250, it's just going to get a shrink of 1, a grow of 1, and it works that way. So it works nicely, and I could do a 1, 250, or let's do 2. So it's going to grow faster than the other ones because the other ones have a grow of 1. Let's put a shrink of 2 on them, but it's going to automatically give it a shrink of 1. So the shrink is going, it's shrinking slower than the other ones are shrinking because it's defaulting to a 1 on the shrink. So if you want to use the shorthand here, it is a little bit easier because if you forget one of them or you just ignore it, it automatically fills it in for you. So I usually just use the flex property like that. So yeah, that's I think pretty cool. Now I'm going to come up to here and change a couple of things, or just one thing. Let's change my align items to flex, flex start. So when I do an align items flex start, they all get aligned up to the top like that, or they get aligned to the on the cross axis, the start of the cross axis. So now what I can do is I can take the align self and put a flex end on this, and it's going to align it. It's the same as the align items property, except it's aligning only itself on that part. So the flex end, I can pull one thing down, or I can do an align self center, and it's going to center just that one item. So align self can be kind of cool. If I took off my align, say I take this one off, these ones are stretching because the default for align items is to be stretch. So that's why they're taking up all that space. That's the default. But as soon as I do an align self, it's breaking out of the default. So you can choose whichever of the align items properties that you'd want for align self and control it on its own. So that's awesome. And the last one is order, and I was going to do order before align self, so I'm out of order, but that's okay. You can control the order of things. Now the thing that's a little weird with order is if you do an order 1, it actually goes to the end because these ones don't have an order on them. If I do an order 0, it will go to its natural resting place. It doesn't pull it over to the front, which is what a lot of people originally assume, and it's because the default is 0. So if I don't give anything, it's just giving it an order of 0 by default. So order 0 just puts it back to where it is in the HTML. If you do want to pull it all the way to the start, you can give it a negative value though, and that will pull it all the way to the beginning. And you might be wondering, why would I want to put an order on it? This is nice when you want to rearrange things when it's a mobile display or going from mobile to something else. If you need to change the order of things because you don't like the way things are falling, this is a nice way to do it. So I can actually have my item 2, my item 3, and then my item 1. Or if I make this a bigger negative value, I could do that. I wouldn't suggest getting too far into the negatives. I think it would make more sense to do a 1, a 2, and an order 3 if you really needed to change the order of things like that. Or in this case, because they're reversed, I could just change my flex direction to row reverse. That might be a bit smarter, but it's just to show you you can change the order of all of your flex items to any order you want them to be in. So that's a nice nifty thing that can give you a lot of control on for when you're using media queries and trying to get things where you need them to be.
And there you go. Now, some of those items might be a little bit confusing and weird still, so if that's the case,
All right, so that was pretty much the basics of Flexbox. Again, let me repeat, I do not expect you to just be able to do things after watching this video. This is just to show you that there is an option for, not there is an option, but you can organize content inside your website so much easier than what you have been doing. So it's just a visual lesson more than you actually learning anything. The learning will come, and that's what I'm going to talk about right now. All right, so project number 4. So for project number 4, it's not going to be like a website creating project. All right. Instead, I would like you to learn how to use Flexbox. All right. So I have gone over this website, but I'm going to go over it again. This is a website called Flexbox Froggy. Okay. Hold on. All right. So the objective here is the frog will be somewhere and you have to put it in the lily pad, right? And you have to do it using Flexbox properties. All right. So this is a game in the overall context. So, but it is also a great learning opportunity. So that is what we're going to do for project 4. So here is how it is going to work. Come on. All right, so you will go to flexboxfroggy.com and complete all 24 levels of this game. All right. Each level is approximately 4.16 points, which means 24 into 4.16 will almost equal 99 point something. All right. Now, your points for this project will be based on the level you reach. So level 17, oops, sorry, I should have put that down as 17, equals passing grade. So if you can reach level 17, you will get 70.72, which when rounded up will be 71 out of 100. Okay. Once you are finished, when you get to whatever level you get to, you're going to put your name in comments. Since it is a CSS sandbox, you should be able to put in a comment, right? So you're going to put in your name in the comment, you're going to take a screenshot, and then you're going to post that screenshot onto Moodle. Okay, I want the entire page, and your name should be on there. If your name is not on there, you don't get the points. I'm just manage somehow manage to put your name on there. It's not that difficult to do, right? So that is what project 4 is. If anybody is wondering if anybody has done it, yes, somebody has done it. And here is how it looks. Kirill has done it. So he's level 24. He's pretty much proven himself. So you should be able to do it as well, right? So any questions about what we learned today?
No questions.
All right, that's one person.
All good.
Okay.
I'm fine too.
Questions.
Okay. All right, guys. So, this subject matter for now can seem a little bit complicated. But again, the more you do, the more you learn, right? You can't expect to just look at the video and just be able to do it. You have to do it in order to actually learn it. And, doing this is a lot of fun. At least I felt so. Kirill, what did you think? I think you were asking for more, learning material like this, right?
I mean, yeah, something like this was actually fun. Like, yeah, just in general.
How long did it take you to finish 24 levels?
Maybe like 40 minutes.
Okay, see, not bad, guys. Not bad at
Yeah,
all.
like the ending was the longest because like the instructions I think are not well. It's like at the beginning up till 24, they just tell you what to do, and then they just throw everything at you. And then I kept trying to like isolate the yellow frogs and move them like separately, but that just didn't work for some reason.
Okay.
So I just ended up doing like I suppose they intend in the beginning. So.
Okay, but it worked out, right? You managed to do it. All 24 levels are complete, so not bad. 40 minutes. You have a lot of time to do this, so I don't expect you to just finish in 40 minutes. Kirill is a very talented person, but 40 minutes, if you sit down and do it, it is more than you're more than capable of doing it. What else? Again, I cannot stress the importance of learning how to use Flexbox. If your plan is to actually create websites at a professional level, this is how you do it. And these just keep getting more and more advanced. And why do people in IT make the most money? It's because things are difficult and they learn the difficult things. That's why they make money, right? So I would think it's going to be fine. All right, so let's see. Today is what? Today is Wednesday, right? Let's see how many people are able to finish by Tuesday, next Tuesday. All right. Actually, no, next Monday. And then I will talk about project 5 next Tuesday, because and then we'll also learn about MindTap assignments at that point.